So we are live now. We can start.
Hello. Is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
Hmm?
We can
Do we
start, sir.
start?
Yes, sir.
Hello. So, welcome. Namaskar. We are starting the discussion on emergence of Taiwan and its implication for India. So, we have with us a panel of eminent personalities. We have Ambassador T.P. Sreenivasan IFS retired. He's a very seasoned diplomat. He was the Indian ambassador to several countries. He represented government of India in the United States. He was the governor of India, the permanent representative to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Vienna. He held on the post for 6 years, and he's a very seasoned diplomat. He has been into many discussions. Even he told me once about he having a serious discussion after Pokhran 2 on the NPT and all those things. So, Sreenivasan sir is with us today in our panel. I welcome Peter Sreenivasan sir. Thank you for the program. And with us there is Prafulla Kelkar. He's the editor of Organiser Weekly and he's a Chinese expert. He is the product of JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and he's a MPhil in international relations from the same university, and he's a specialist on China. Prafulji I wholeheartedly welcome Prafulji Kelkar for the function. We are jointly organized this function, Center for Policy and Development Studies, a think tank based out of Chennai, and the Organiser Weekly, one of the oldest English weeklies, and mouthpiece of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Center. We also have Ganesh Radhakrishnan, who is a senior sub-editor with Organiser Weekly. Ganesh is also a keen reader, a writer, and he writes on international diplomacy, politics. So this is our panel. I'm Arun Lakshman. I'm a journalist. I was with Organiser, with the Pioneer, and with Indian Express. And I'm also with Center for Policy and Development Studies now. I welcome all the audience. I think Professor Kelkar will start the discussion with a few points, and then we will shift on to Sreenivasan sir. Is it okay now?
Okay.
Okay. Professor, we'll start now.
Thank you, Arun, for organizing a discussion on this timely topic. Tomorrow is the critical day because Taiwan is looking forward to get the observer status again at the World Health Organization meeting, and India is supporting this bid. There are many countries who are trying to come in support of Taiwan in this effort. But this is not just related to WHO. This is not just related to COVID-19. COVID-19, the pandemic, has certainly created issues related to the reliability and credibility of China as a state, uh, especially the Chinese Communist Party and the entire Chinese structure is seen with a lot of suspicion, if not Chinese people. I always believe that these are two different entities and we have to deal with them. But what we have seen over the period of time is the kind of narrative that was built up around China, that anything talking about Taiwan or Taiwan Strait issue or the Republic of China, what is generally called with the capital of Taipei. All these things were, almost completely prohibited, and the Chinese blackmailing tactics were very critically used. But that has suddenly changed. The real concern for today is why this is sudden change, how Taiwan has emerged as a side effect of this entire COVID-19 crisis, and what can be the possible implications for the future world order from Indian perspective. These are the critical issues that we need to ponder upon. I will just throw light on some of the developments that have taken up, and TP Sreenivasan is very seasoned diplomat, and with a huge experience of dealing with countries, and he knows the kind of developments that are taking place not just in South China Sea but entire Indo Pacific, and the way global narrative that is emerging around China, the isolation of China, the credibility of China, all these things under severe strain. But as I said, the side effect of this entire process is the emergence of Taiwan. As we know, since 1949, this issue was left to the back burner, and whether two China policy or one China policy, but by and large, especially since China became the major manufacturing hub, there was a kind of consensus that nobody will talk about Taiwan as a separate issue. Interestingly, the person who was colonel then and now retired as general, and authored the book called Unrestricted Warfare, that was mainly to target the United States of America. uh, he suddenly came up with a statement last week that forcible unification of Taiwan is not on agenda for the mainland China, which is very interesting, proposition. Why this particular statement right now? But this is not just limited to one statement. US has openly come up and recognized Chinese, the Taiwan as a separate entity. In fact, the permanent mission in the United Nations, the American permanent mission has campaigned for Taiwan, a separate recognition to the Taiwanese embassy. Uh, all these developments clearly show that there is something, deeper that is happening when it comes to the Taiwan issue. Now, another critical aspect that we need to keep in mind is about the Taiwan model of dealing with the pandemic. Uh, See, Taiwan has the deepest, links when it comes to the business or people-to-people interaction with the mainland China. It is hardly, 80 kilometers away, but still, China, Taiwan has managed to deal with, this crisis very effectively, and uh, post SARS, Taiwan has effectively developed a healthcare system to deal with the such kind of pandemics, which is proving to be very very critical. And the recent development that even our science and technology ministry has signed a certain understanding with the Taiwanese universities to develop a long-term understanding as far as the collaboration for dealing with the future pandemics are concerned. So these are very interesting developments. Another development from Indian point of view that has come up, that India restricted investment, modified certain investment laws recently, and the states that are sharing boundaries with India are exempted, and the union will have to, the center will have to give a special permission for such investment. Now we have exempted Taiwan in this. Now again, this is a very different kind of posturing. So, the first question that emerges in this entire thing is Taiwan critical issue as far as the global order is concerned in the post-COVID scenario? One. Secondly, because Taiwan has become not just an important destination or model that has contained the pandemic, but it has also emerged an important invest destination for the companies that are getting out of China. Japan is openly showing that sign. So how far Taiwan will benefit out of this Chinese culpability and the losing credibility of China as a manufacturing hub of the world. And thirdly, from Indian point of view, are we really looking for greater recognition and integration with the Republic of China, and understanding and giving due recognition to Taipei when it comes to the technological and business? We already have economic and cultural council, but the business activities are fine. But are we politically ready to take it? And most importantly, how this will all these things will have an impact on internal dynamics in China, because there are Xi Jinping already is under pressure. There are divisions in the Chinese Communist Party. They believe that the political and legal committee of CCP and PLA are already having some tension. So Taiwanese issue coming forward will further complicate the matter for Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party. Now, how all these things will unfold and how far India will reposition itself to counter the Chinese influence, not just in Southeast Asia, but also entire South Asia and spreading up to Africa. That is going to be a very interesting scenario. Uh, I also see the way Europe is responding to this crisis. Uh, America, the United States is already in very aggressive posturing. Daily, certain allegations are made. If you uh, see the certain things that are taken up on Chinese front by the United States of America, for example, US has US Senate has passed the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act 2020. Now that is one issue that US has picked up. Then White House petition has already started China, a petition stopping China to build dam on the upstream Mekong River. This is the second issue that was picked up. Then in Washington D.C. there is a street that is named after the Chinese doctor who rang the alarm bells as far as COVID-19 is concerned. This is the third aspect. And fourth issue, fourth one is Hong Kong. The Hong Kong issue is picking up, and the democratic movement that is there in Hong Kong is going out of hand virtually, and CCP and Xi Jinping is already under pressure on this. And the way Japan is, trying to make issues related to, the Chinese supply chain, the way China has misused this entire scenario and tried to cover up, misuse the World Health Organization. So all these things will be discussed. And when tomorrow, when Taiwan issue will be the critical issue uh, before WHO, and eventually when next month India is going to take over the chairmanship of the WHO, how far we are in a position to take China head on, though diplomatically and politically we are still trying to maintain certain balance, but while doing taking certain steps, taking this policy forward. We have seen the way China has tried to counter us on each and every front when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to banning terrorist organization, when it supported Pakistan. All on all these fronts, China has tried to manipulate the entire process. The same thing, happened when it comes to WTO and the Chinese manipulation of the rules and regulations. So, how we are going to play our cards in the coming days, and how far it will change the entire what I would like to call the shift from geopolitics to geoeconomics to now perhaps the entire gamut of uh, geotechnology and economy and politics combined all. How it is going to change the map for global order, that is going to be very interesting. And in that, Taiwan will be the most critical factor, not just for China, but for the entire globe. So here, I have tried to present the scenario and in fact raise certain questions. And as Ambassador Sreenivasan is there with us, and perhaps the most appropriate person to elaborate on how does he see all these developments and what are the future preparations that we are needed so that we can take our interests forward, and even in the international humanitarian interest we try to play a responsible role whenever the Taiwanese issue come up on international fora. So over to you, sir, and thanks Arun again for organizing this event.
Sreenivasan sir, you can now take over.
Okay, thank you, Arun. Thank you, Mr.
Before that, Arun, before that, will you just please be able to pause your audio? Turn off the audio on your screen. It is creating a lot of disturbance while speaking.
Oh, okay.
I'm also doing the same.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Arun, and thank you, Mr. Kelkar. I agree with most of the things that Mr. Kelkar has outlined, so my work is much easier. But I'd like to look at it first from the historical point of view and then what has happened after COVID. The reality or the absolute bottom line for China is that Taiwan is part of China. And that is strengthened by the fact that the whole world, most of the people of the world, recognize what is called a one China policy, which means Taiwan can exist according to the Chinese description only as part of China. And that is a fundamental position that they have taken since 1971, when Taiwan moved out of the Security Council and China took its position. We were in the forefront of bringing China back because we felt that China should have its legitimate place in the UN and in the Security Council. So most of the countries of the world, including the other permanent members, believe in a one China policy. But both China and all of us have dealt with the issue in a practical manner because Taiwan has become a significant world power. 24 million people, but in very good shape, prosperity, science, technology, trade, everything they can rival anybody. So without challenging the Chinese position that Taiwan is part of China, officially or politically, we have worked out a formula. And that has worked because Chinese themselves had agreed to that. And what is that formula? That is, China does not get a membership of the UN. Ever since I have been to the UN since 1979, every year there is a vote. They come to the Security Council and China vetoes them and everything is closed and the functioning goes down. As far as India is concerned, also we had a very practical relationship with Taiwan. We have an office of a representative in Taiwan and they have one in India. My own brother T.P. Sitaram was India's representative to Taiwan a few years ago. And they used to address him as ambassador, not as representative. So there is a kind of de facto recognition that we were working with together. And we have a very good cooperation with China, with Taiwan also, and China is aware of it. So this was the kind of happy compromise that we had worked out. But now we have come to a crisis because China is seeing the COVID issue as a step towards their world status. This is what we have to understand. We do not know whether they engineered it. Of course, if they engineered it, we can understand. But if they did not engineer it, even if it is by accident, the way they have handled it right from October 2019, they are looking at this as a God's blessing for themselves to take over the leadership of the world. So in front of them, they have United States suffering very badly. United States already withdrawn from the world stage after Mr. Trump came in, and then they have withdrawn from various international arrangements. And on top of it now, its weakness and the power to hold and save their people, and they're saving their life. United States has failed. Similarly, the European Union, again, because of COVID, has become weaker. There's no great strength. Russia is siding with China. So in these circumstances, they have changed their approach to Taiwan as a symbol of their superior power they think they are going to acquire as a result of COVID. But the problem here is that China's intentions and China's credentials aren't questioned. For many people in the world, particularly for the United States, China is the villain of COVID. But he would like to, Xi Jinping would like to present himself as the hero of COVID, saying that we have now recovered, we are now willing to work with everybody, our supply chain is coming back, everything is beautiful, while the whole world is suffering, we are back to normal, and therefore we are willing to help the world. So they want to be the hero. So against this background, we have to see this issue. Even on the question of WHO membership for Taiwan, there was a compromise. Till 2016, Taiwan was an observer of WHO. So what has happened now? What has happened is that after the Taiwan election, when there is this tough lady, a Democratic Party lady has become president, China has become more nervous about Taiwan. So they had expected a different result. So with the power that she has got and her attitude being that Taiwan is not part of China, so they are targeting her to weaken Taiwan. But Taiwan has got tremendous reputation because the way they have dealt with COVID. They were the first one to inform WHO that there was something happening in China, which WHO ignored basically. But later they found that they had not only informed the world, but they had also handled it. 24 million, there are only 400 people infected. And so it has become a model for fighting a health issue of this kind. So while China is looking at Taiwan to subdue it more, Taiwan, because of the new president, as well as their new record of COVID, has emerged as a power to reckon with. And that is the scene that we are seeing in WHO. Here the problem is for all of us, including India and including United States, is that we believe in a one China policy. We cannot change that. So what we can do is only, because we have China is a big neighbor, we need to have peace and tranquility with China. And therefore we cannot suddenly say, no, we believe that there are two Chinas. That is not possible. What is possible is to negotiate within the WHO another kind of compromise without sacrificing the one China policy, considering the renewed strength that Taiwan has assumed as a result of their new leadership, as well as their record of dealing with the corona. So we don't know what the picture is, but many countries, because there is no vote or there is no veto possible in the WHO, and therefore it has to be negotiated. The advantage that Taiwan has is that they have a support of a large number of countries. Unlike in the United Nations for the membership, they shy away. But in this particular case, a practical arrangement by which WHO can use the expertise and experience of Taiwan. A consensus is slowly emerging in the WHO. But we have only a few hours more, so we do not know where it is going to go. But I have the feeling that China will arrive at some kind of a compromise on this. Purely saying that this has nothing to do with one China, this is an emergency situation, and therefore we have to deal with it, and Taiwan's experience is necessary, etc. And that kind of a non-political technical pressure that can be mounted. India will naturally, because we are going to be the chairman of the executive committee from the end of May, so we have to be particularly careful and impartial in this decision. But India has always played a moderating role in these kinds of disputes all around the world. I often say India is not working for ourselves, we are always working for others. So in that situation, that experience that we have a role to play, and I'm sure we are playing that role. In between, of course, you know that what the foreign minister of Taiwan spoke when he came to India and spoke about India-Taiwan relations. He explained how much India and Taiwan are cooperating and how much more they are willing to do, particularly in the context of COVID. But that is not prevented by this. We already have a mechanism. As I said, there is a special representative who is like an ambassador in Taiwan for us, and similarly they have one in India. And therefore, bilateral cooperation with Taiwan is not prohibited at all within the present framework. But in our heart of hearts, I think India would like Taiwan to be there because of these technical reasons, even though we realize that politically this is a very difficult thing to accomplish. So just as China had agreed in the pre-COVID period to adjust and accommodate the political sensitivities, they should now show more generosity and work out another compromise. But if we stick to this and make it a huge issue, breaking up the WHO, Chinese claim to become a world leader or one of the world leaders will suffer. So they should realize that. So their best way for China would be maintain their technical position, sovereignty issues, etc. At the same time, as a practical issue, try and resolve it. And India has a role here, because if you look at the world today, and if you look at the candidates who are going to emerge as the different multipolar world, we are not looking for hegemony of the world. What we are looking for is that India must have a role to play as one of the poles of the world which are emerging. And there we have an advantage now, because we have not criticized anybody, we have not criticized China, we have not criticized the United States, we have not criticized Russia. We have only good feelings for all of them, and we are trying to work with them to deal with the COVID. India's own record is not so bad, though it is looking a little bit worse than before, but we have been able to have a good policy. We have many things to provide to even China in terms of masks and other facilities. Some of our medicines are being exported. Ayurveda and yoga are very prominent in this field. So considering all that, India has a big role to play, and I hope they will play that. India will play that and bring this to a conclusion. Did you hear that? I think I got cut off. Did I? In between, I disappeared from the screen.
There was some lag or disconnection. I don't know.
But did you hear my conclusion?
Yeah.
So I don't have to repeat it.
No. Sir, there is one interesting position that China has taken, where China has said, bringing this issue on global forum right now will weaken our, fight against COVID-19. Now, that is the official position that China has taken. How do you see the things unfolding on this Chinese line? And the way Trump administration and Mike Pompeo going aggressively on each and every Chinese proposition. So, as a diplomat, how do you see this Chinese position being countered at the global level? And there is already news that Indian MEA team is already in touch with 6-7 people in Indo-Pacific and yes, 6-7 countries in Indo-Pacific, and there is a possibility that at least observer status will be agreed upon.
Well, you raised two issues. One is whether there's an argument that bringing the issue into the WHO will complicate matters. That everybody understands it's an excuse. There is no reason. Then nothing will be upset. It will only help in the process. But their real intention, as I explained earlier, they want to advance their position towards world leadership. And if that is their intention, I think they will be somewhat unwise to press an issue like this. If they show more generosity and more accommodation, that will help them. I'm sure the Chinese will know what is good for them. On the American position, they will certainly press for an investigation. Whether it is done now or in a post-COVID world, we don't know. The Chinese are resisting it strongly, very strongly, which is suspicious. They are not allowing the laboratory to be inspected. And therefore, but one day or the other, this truth is going to come out. And before that, if China is careful enough and wise enough and shrewd enough, they must try to secure the support of the world, because as far as the world is concerned today, Taiwan is not the issue. COVID is the issue. How to recover, how to save our lives, that is the issue. Anything that China does against it will go only against it. And therefore, I have a feeling that they will work out some kind of a compromise in this, rather than stick out and say that they will not allow this. The Americans have shown some softness today. The President has said that he is willing to say states pay at least a part of the contribution, American contribution to WHO. That's also a little temptation that he is offering to China, because China has asked that Americans should pay. So they're saying, okay, we are willing to pay, we are willing to be reasonable if you are reasonable. So that is the linkage. So there also I see a little bit of hope. So, but we are going to see what happens tomorrow, and I'm quite optimistic that something will be worked out for all these various reasons.
You're absolutely right, sir. For the world, Taiwan is not the issue, and COVID-19 is the real issue. But while thinking about countering COVID-19, Taiwan is a model, and we have a lot to learn. India has already signed that kind of agreement. So how do you see this mutual understanding or relationship can help us in developing certain framework to deal with pandemic today and even in the future?
Well, the foreign minister's statement was very clear on this, that the Taiwanese foreign minister's statement was that we already have a technical arrangement. We have representatives in each other's country. And there have been several areas in which we are cooperating with them, particularly technology. And therefore, the framework already exists. So we don't need Chinese permission to deal with Taiwan. That's not an issue. And therefore, whatever we want to do with Taiwan with regard to their cooperation with us on COVID-19 can be done. But certainly, if they are also in the WHO, it will be helpful to us, because if we are going to chair the executive body, to have Taiwan, which has a very good experience and are willing to help others. And that will be a great help, not only to India as a country, but also to the world. So that is what we should be looking at. But in a bilateral cooperation with Taiwan is no issue. And they had also a formula that will be called Taipei China or Chinese Taipei and not Taiwan. That compromise also exists. So where is the issue? So the issue is really the Chinese trying to gain a foothold and try to become a world leader through the COVID-19. And that is where the primary issue now rests.
Taiwan is becoming a factor. But sir, here again, one issue is you have rightly pointed out that COVID-19 has completely exposed the vulnerabilities of the Western world, especially the Europe and the United States of America. Though China has, shown some metal initially by showing the way China dealt with the issue, and later through, the tough political stand that China is taking. But in the process, has lost of credibility, as in done the manufacturing, thing is concerned. We are ready because it requires a lot of infrastructure and it requires totally different kind of mechanism. But do you see, Taiwan becoming that destination, and then eventually it becomes a kind of internal, the pressure tactics against China by the Americans to get the things done?
Well, the Americans are. Can you hear me? The Americans are fully supportive of Taiwan. Americans are fully supportive of Taiwan. If there is a confrontation, Americans are going to support Taiwan against China, and that is very clear. So, but who wants a war? Nobody wants a war. Even China wouldn't want a war. And they are probably looking at a Hong Kong kind of formula. One nation with two systems. Now one nation with three systems. These things may happen. And I'm not an expert on Taiwan, but I have a feeling that a large number of people in Taiwan feel that coexistence is essential with China, and it is not going to be conflict. And therefore, that discussion is going on, and that has accentuated because China is becoming a little bit greedy. Can we get some point out of this to put Taiwan in a difficulty because a new president has been elected? If she had lost the election, the Chinese would have been softer towards Taiwan. So that's also a factor. So we have to see how the Chinese judge the situation and try to get the maximum benefit out of it. That's what they are trying to do. But with the configuration of so many important countries supporting Taiwan, they are also under pressure. So it's not an easy decision that China has to take at this point. And if I were Chinese, I would go for a compromise.
Okay. So, Arun, over to you. If you have any, issue or question to take this discussion forward.
No, yeah, I think that there is you mentioned that there was some universities bilateral agreement between Indian universities and Taipei were signed. So doesn't that mean the bilateral dealing with Taiwan as a country or as a province? That is my one point which I wanted to raise.
No, you mean bilateral?
No, as Sreenivasan has already mentioned, we have been doing that on various issues. We already have certain structural arrangement. What the question that I was putting was, whether it will be strengthened eventually, and we will also play. China certainly plays the Kashmir card. China certainly plays the Masood Azhar card. So can we really play Taiwan card to deal with China in the future? Because we are doing it very silently. Our science and tech ministry did that, and if I'm not wrong, around 6 or 7 universities will have a future cooperation as far as the research related to pandemic is concerned, and that's a very positive step. I'm not sure how China. Whenever you ask Chinese will always reply you not related to Taiwan, because for them they will show as if Taiwan issue doesn't exist for them. They will always remind you why you are going into American kind of camp, and that this bogey of American camp is always used to convince Indians. But the moment you talk about the Asian scenario, the Asian game, China shows its real tendencies. That is the problem that China as a communist state is facing. So what I see is Taiwan becoming a critical issue. Though bilaterally we have some structural arrangement, it will be somewhat strengthened or weakened depending on what is the Chinese position. The more China loses credibility on international forums, the better we will have our positioning when dealing with Taipei is concerned. But the real issue is whether Hong Kong or Taiwan, all these arrangements are going to be critical when it comes to dealing with the post COVID-19 China. Whether Chinese credibility, because in Africa China is losing a lot of, not in terms of direct ground, but in terms of credibility. The same is true when it comes to Europe. Many of the countries who initially joined this BRI initiative are showing certain reservations. Many countries who are under Chinese debt are have started talking about debt colonialism. Now, this is happening very openly. Again, you can say that every country, to protect its own state interest, national interest, is using this as a chip. But that's what I'm saying, that Taiwan can become a critical chip in a post-COVID scenario. And the more strengthened Taiwan and the lessen, credible China is going to create different kind of scenario when it comes to India's neighborhood and even the international order. If you want to add something, sir.
Sreenivasan sir, can you hear me? Sreenivasan sir, can you hear me? Sreenivasan sir, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you, do you want to add something to what Prafulji has told regarding this? He signed out really.
No, nothing. Really, nothing more to add. Mr. Kelkar has been clear in his assertion that such cooperation with the universities, etc., are not going to suffer. And in fact, the growth of Taiwan and its ability to help other countries in various areas is actually good for us, because our students used to go to China, but now they probably more of them can go to Taiwan rather than China because of these various difficulties that have come up. And therefore, the old arrangement that we can deal with Taiwan in a friendly and practical manner is good for us. So we hope that the Chinese will not aggravate the situation and create a military problem or anything like that which disturbs the arrangement there. Because many countries at one time, I recall, there were several countries who did not recognize People's Republic of China. In South Pacific, when I went to many countries, I used to find the Taiwanese ambassador there. But that has changed because the Chinese have started giving them money so much under the various projects that these small countries have shifted from Taiwan to China. But if China does not give these opportunities to these countries, they will stick to the Taiwanese. So the number of countries which recognize Taiwan has reduced in the last few years because of this big financial trust that China has made into these countries, whether it is Africa or South Pacific or wherever. That they will continue, the whole Belt and Road Initiative and so on. But we don't know what these countries would be after the pandemic. We haven't seen it yet. And so the whole world is in a flux. We don't know what the world is going to be. We can only see the trends. We cannot see the ultimate result. And so all these are small aspects which contribute to the changes in the world we are going to see. But the reality may be much worse than what we see today. And that is really the anxiety.
But sir, in between Prafulji has said that China is, in between Prafulji Kelkar said that China is leading these countries to a debt trap. There's a debt trap. Even Sri Lanka, there were some issues. Can you some debt?
Debt trap.
Yeah,
that But all these are new now. That world has changed. 2019 world was, people are worried about debt trap, the way the Chinese were, establishing their hegemony over various things, etc. But that's all that world is gone now. Now everybody has to reshape his thinking, including the Chinese. And if the Chinese push for leadership of the world, then they have to also be diplomatic, they have to be friendly, they have to be soft, they have to be gentle. And all these things we'll see in the next few months. So next 1 or 2 years will be very decisive in this. And where I see is a kind of silver lining for India. India's role has been welcomed. Generally, in fact, there is even a suggestion that maybe India should lead, our Prime Minister should lead a global movement against COVID. Even such suggestions have come up from other countries. So, and we should actually, project that, our capabilities in this regard. And the privatization announcements that they have made now, the last few days, and that will attract more direct investment from other countries. And that's also a major point of support for India. So all these considered, we have a chance. We have played it very well. We have been very impartial. We have been very just. And therefore, that would, in the long run, benefit India out of this chaos that we see now.
But one thing for sure, Arun, in coming days, there will be a lot of arms twisting by the Chinese. China is known for this. We have seen, Canada silently, moving away from the, originally stated position on Taiwan is concerned. China will not keep quiet. But what is interestingly happening is the way internal dynamics in China are changing very fast. The dynamics within CCP, the dynamics of the so-called mainland, that is changing. Few months ago, Xi Jinping was seen as a supreme leader. Xi Jinping was seen as a lifelong leader. This is going to be a testing time, and Taiwan and Hong Kong both are going to test Xi Jinping like anything, because they will be used. They are not the real issue, but they will be used against Xi Jinping within China and outside China. So whether Xi Jinping become reassert himself, come up clean, and establishes his complete control over the party and the administration, or he has to come up with some compromise with the internal dissent and the political and legal committee of the party and PLA, so that some future arrangement is proposed quickly. That is going to be the real thing. And if that somewhere happens, then you will see a totally different kind of China, because till now, that leadership and the assertion and the positioning of that leadership as a chairman, after now, as a chairman or towards chairman, that was seen as a very, very formidable position. That has come under strain. That we need to understand. So arm twisting by China at the, as a result of internal strains, that is going to be the interesting proposition, and we have to be ready for each and every permutation and combination emerging out of it.
Ganesh, can you put in some inputs on this? Ganesh, you hear me?
Hello.
Ganesh?
Sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I hear.
Can you put some inputs on this?
No, I was actually pretty curious about this Belt and Road initiative. So the post-corona world, how China is going to push that? And will it have any?
Impacts, huh?
Can you hear me?
Whether this project, I think Sreenivasan sir can give some insights on this. Whether BRI will have some impact of COVID-19 and this the way Taiwan issue is speaking.
Well, I'm not a China expert. I don't know the internal situation very well. But what Mr. Ketkar said about impossibility of an internal revolt cannot be ruled out. But we all predict this, but nothing happens. Even much worse situation in China, the leadership does not change till the time is up. 10 years everybody gets, and that kind of a system, a meritocracy has developed and so on. So while these pressures will be on Xi Jinping to shift and move and so on, he is holding on. Because if he was to go, he should have gone at the time when the Wuhan crisis took place. And he was not visible for some time. So at that time, there was speculation that maybe he is taking the responsibility and leaving, or somebody is pressurizing him to move out, etc. But these are just wishful thinking on the part of the rest of the world. The Chinese system is much more solidified. These pressures may be there, but I have lived in the Soviet Union. The same thing we have seen those days. It is difficult to move out a leader. It does not happen. So many things happen, but the only two things that people used to predict were, number one, that China might suffer on account of the contradiction in their policies. That is, you cannot have a totally politically controlled state with a totally liberal economy. This cannot work. And that is what most people thought from 1971 onwards. How does it work? How can capitalism work in a communist state? But they have managed it all these years. And so, but this conflict between the two has to emerge sometime. And that may be the point of departure for China. That was one speculation. The second speculation was the total disregard for protection of the environment. Because China, as you know, in climate change situation, they are the worst in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Because China is our collaborator in this because we ask about per capita emissions, not global emissions. Because we are huge countries, 1.3 billion and so on. So you cannot just say that we must have this same amount of emissions as other countries have. So our argument that this per capita emission that matters has held us. India and China have argued this together. I was myself in the climate change negotiations, and my best friend was the Chinese ambassador because his views and our views were absolutely identical. But at the same time, they were not giving any attention to doing some things on their own. In Beijing in June, you cannot even see the sky. The pollution was so bad. So the pollution and the climate change issues on the one hand, and the contradiction between the Chinese communist system and an open commercial dealing with Americans. These were the two contradictions that people were talking about. Now we are not talking about any of those. We are not talking about implications of COVID on China. And from what we have seen till now, they have handled it very well from their perspective. On the one hand, they say we did not create it. On the other hand, they say they have controlled it. And now they are wanting to help the rest of the world. So they have handled it well. So I don't know what internal pressure there might be in China. But at the moment, they seem to be doing quite well.
Manish, this BRI thing, it's an interesting dynamics that is coming up. See, China was on a defensive when it comes to BRI, simply because all the countries that recognized or were part, initially became part of the BRI, were the biggest sufferers of COVID-19. You take it Spain, you take it, Italy. These were the countries who not just recognized but ready to be part of Belt and Road Initiative. So to counter that, what China has started doing now is China is on the one hand, redirecting towards this maritime Silk Route issue. That is one thing that it is pushing. But at the same time, it is trying to bring in Iran on this, not directly on BRI, but on CCEP. So this China-Pakistan economic corridor, CPEC, is becoming, can become a problematic thing from Indian perspective. That is the most critical thing. If Iran has traditionally shown reservations like India on this entire project, but if Iran goes on board, then it will be problematic. I think it is China's counter strategy to change the perception. But when it comes to the maritime countries, the Indo-Pacific countries, even some African countries, they have openly said that we want certain concessions. We want certain compensation, and they will. The similar thing will happen about this entire BRI project. And we have started, giving access to the Central Asian countries to our port in Iran. That also shows that there is, bigger game that will play up when it comes to the global order. But I won't, divert there. What I would suggest is Chinese BRI project will certainly see new kind of pressures, but still China would like to push it. If China really wants to continue as a manufacturing hub and be critical part of this critical supply chain market, then China will have to inch upon. And it is also critical for the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping himself, because he has sold this project. See, China is state capitalist machinery. It has to be like a white elephant. It has to continuously feed itself. So unless it pushes for this demand side through BRI, I think it will be very difficult for China and Chinese Communist Party to hold on. So that will be the critical challenge for CCP and Xi Jinping.
I think we should wind up. Ganesh, you can do.
For me, it's an honor to have been asked to propose vote of thanks. I know I'm audible.
Yeah.
Okay. Today we had a very fruitful discussion, and I would like to extend my most sincere thanks to Ambassador T.P. Sreenivasan and editor organizer Shri sir, and the CPDS director Sri Lakshman sir, and I thought this event will surely be going to encourage us in our future events also. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Arun. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very helpful.
It's a very good discussion.